Dr. Michael Breus, the sleep doctor.
That's
How are
me.
you?
I'm happy to be here, man. This is going to be fun.
I'm very excited. This is my first interview in LA, so I'm here for 2 weeks. We've got I was just saying, we have a mutual friend who introduced us, James
Yes,
Whitaker, who's going to be coming on the podcast very shortly. But I'm always excited to do episodes like this because I find I kind of have two episodes. I have episodes that are just good value to young people and use like mindset or all these different things. Then I have episodes that are like history or sleep, and I find that's when we get the detail and can get really deep. Now, obviously, keeping in mind, we have a much younger audience, so maybe a bit of a different audience to what you're used to. I'm not too sure.
Good news is everybody sleeps.
Exactly.
So I can pretty much talk about any type of demographic in terms of sleep, and some of the things are actually quite similar.
Yeah.
And some of the things, if I knew some of the things that I know now when I was between like 15 and 25. Oh, dude, I'd have crushed it much earlier.
Right, and this is the advantage I want to give these people.
It's kind of like a cheat code.
Yeah, it is. So I've watched your TED Talks. You've got some pretty interesting stuff. You've written a bunch of books as well, which is amazing. And so before we get into it, I always ask one question, and that's very, very simple. That is, what did you do after high school?
What did I do after high school?
And what was the thought process for you? What was going on in your head there?
So right after high school, I was pretty confused. I'll tell you that. I went into college. And when I went into college, I decided to study psychology. To be honest with you, it was where all the cute girls were. So if there were cute girls in the class, that's where I was headed.
Very nice.
And then I actually started to really enjoy clinical psychology quite a bit. Made it through undergraduate college and decided I was going to go to graduate school to get a PhD in clinical psychology. And what ended up happening once I did that was I was thinking I was going to be a sports psychologist. So I wanted to be the guy. I was not very good at sports in high school, by the way. Like I was kind of the nerdy guy who just kind of hung out. Thank you. And didn't really get to do a whole lot of sports. I wasn't particularly popular. I was kind of like, the guy in the corner. And I figured if I became a sports psychologist, I'd get to hang out with all the athletes, all the cool folks, and teach people how to, throw more accurately or run faster, do all those kind of cool things. Unfortunately, the best sports psychology internship. So when you're getting a PhD in clinical psychology, you do a residency or an internship the same way an MD doctor does. The best one in the country was at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, I'm originally from Sandy Springs, Georgia, so it didn't really bother me to be in the South. I was kind of looking forward to it. But to be honest with you, I couldn't get in. Like only the Harvards and the Princetons and the Yales of the world were going there. But they had a sleep track. So they had a grant where they were giving people fully funded internships if you were willing to study sleep for 6 months of your internship. And so I was like, aha!
Loophole.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, they don't know they think I'm not going to be in their program, but I'm going to be in. So I sold myself as a sleep guy, and I figured as soon as I get there, I'll just transfer and go right over, right? No problem. So I get there and I raise my hand and they say, Dr. Breus, what can we do for you? And I said, hey man, I want to transfer over into the sports psychology program. They said, we had a feeling that you were going to try to do that. They said, here's the deal. It's funded, so the only way you're going to be able to stay is if you do this for 6 months. And I said, 6 months? How tough can it be? I mean, it's sleep, right? I do it every night. And by the third day, I absolutely fell in love with clinical medicine, clinical sleep medicine. Dude, I help people like this. Yeah. It's unbelievable. When you're a normal clinical psychologist, it can take weeks, months, even years before you start to see any treatment gains. But in sleep, there's times where literally in 24 hours, I can change your life. Yeah. I mean, you change your sleep, you change your life.
And you found that to be quite addictive to see the change in people and have
completely
them come back.
Addictive. Oh, that's exactly the right word for it. Because you're with these people and they show up and they've got anxiety, they've got depression, they've got confusion, they're kind of lost. And a lot of it is because they're sleep deprived. Like, let's be fair. When you're sleep deprived, what kind of good decisions do you make?
Yeah.
None. So the goal here was to see if I could help people gain some level of clarity by giving them a biological function like sleep to do really, really well. I felt like I opened doors for people. I mean, again, you change your sleep, you change your life.
Yeah. And I mean, you've kind of come in at a beautiful time, haven't you? Because I feel like sleep has become so popular.
I know, right?
Over the last kind of, maybe 5 years.
Hopefully I've had something to do with that,
yeah,
right?
I imagine you would have. And, just kind of going back, because a big theme of this podcast is figuring out what to do with your life. At 18 years old, we have this expectation. You got to go to college,
I had
university.
no idea I was going to be a sleep doctor.
And that's it. This is what I hear from everyone. So I liked how you just kind of like followed a path. Okay, you're interested in the sport. let's just follow that pathway. And then as a byproduct, you fell in love with something completely unpredictable.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, to be clear, the path was girls.
Yeah.
Right? Like I took the psychology classes because they were cute girls. I went into clinical psychology, they were cute girls. And then I was figuring out to be in the sports world. And again, it was just kind of this interesting path. And also, to be fair, it was academically kind of interesting, like learning how people tick and kind of understanding the psychology behind why you do the things that you do. People always ask me all the time, well, did you become a sleep doctor because you had a sleep problem? No.
Yeah.
Did anybody in your family have a sleep problem? No. Do I currently have a sleep problem? No. But the dramatic change in somebody it's kind of inspirational.
Absolutely. And I was mentioning I run a program for young people.
Right.
So in 2 days, we always love, because a lot of kids in the room don't want to be there because their parents made them go along.
Right.
So imagine, hey, you have to go learn about bettering yourself for 2 full days, 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night.
Oh,
big days, right?
Yeah.
And, it always sucks having people who don't want to be there, but they're the ones who get the most change. And
Absolutely.
at the end of it, when they come up to you, it's like, that is addicting. That feeling of being able to help people so quickly.
It's so much
see
fun.
a visual change. I also find it addicting in a different way to you.
Sure.
But it is, and it feels good because you're giving back to people.
Well, and if you give them a skill set, it's one thing to like, what's the old saying? If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. I think that's kind of the same as what we're talking about here. Is you're giving people skill sets that if they learn them young, and you can really carry them through, dude, you can do anything. It's unbelievable.
And that is the key point. Like, a big reason I started what I do is because I was in this business and I went to all these events, and I was the youngest in the room by a decade. And they would always come up to me and be like, Byron, God, I wish I knew this when I was 18 or 19. And it sounds like you said the same. Like, you were saying on camera or off camera, I can't remember. You were just saying, but if you can get these skills at 21, 22,
yes,
what a superpower that is.
Oh, it's really interesting. And a lot of things, here's the problem, is people kind of think, oh, if I don't sleep a lot, like I'm a stud, it's cool, blah, blah, blah. This whole generation has figured out that that's total horseshit, right? They figured out like, holy cow, I need to sleep. What I've discovered in kind of the 15 to 25-year-old span of people nowadays, they're starting to value sleep. They're starting to say, hey, I don't want to overwork myself. I don't want to do 80-hour work weeks. I want to learn about how to take care of my body so that way I can actually enjoy whatever the career path is that I choose.
Yeah, and that very much is, this generation I feel like is much more hyper aware of being taken advantage of in the workplace, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I was growing up, there was no such thing as work-life balance.
Yeah.
Right? It was called work-life integration.
Yeah, same thing.
Like, there was none of that stuff in there. And now I have a next week, 21-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter, and they're kind of walking into this, and they have a very different perspective.
It's so different, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
And so let's jump into some of the stuff about sleep. I guess we'll start off with why. You mentioned that, better sleep, better life sort of thing. Why is that? What is the negatives of having poor quality sleep?
So that's actually the right way to ask it, because people always say, well, what does sleep do for you? Well, here's the thing. We have better science on what lack of sleep does to you rather than what does sleep do for you. So what I try to tell people is sleep affects every organ system and every disease state. Literally everything you do better with a good night's sleep. So what do I mean by that? First of all, let's kind of define what is sleep deprivation first. Like, what is bad sleep? Because some people think of sleep only in minutes. I'm going to tell you that you should also think about it in terms of quality. So a lot of people say, oh, did you get your 8 hours of sleep? Me personally, I never get 8 hours of sleep. Ever. It's just not what I do. I'm a 6.5 hour sleeper.
Right.
I'm the freaking sleep doctor,
right?
Right? So like, how does something like that work? The quality of my sleep is so high, it allows me to be able to do all the things that I want to do. Like, this is my first cup of coffee today.
Right. It's 3 o'clock for anyone listening.
Exactly. Right. And so like, you kind of thinking through that as an idea, and it's just because I'm cold. It actually isn't because I wanted the caffeine. But when you think about sleep, it really affects 3 main areas. So it affects you physically, it affects you cognitively, and it affects you emotionally. So let me kind of break that down for you. So physically, we're talking about things like reaction time, right? So if you're driving a vehicle, if you're, you have a job where you're doing manual labor, something like that. For guys out there physically, if you are sleep deprived, and we'll define what that is in just a second, your level of testosterone drops by almost 30%.
Wow.
30%. So if let's say you're a basketball player in one of the national leagues, right? And you're 22 years old. If you're sleep deprived, you're playing like a 33-year-old.
Right.
Bro, you're going to get crushed, right? That's just the physical. Cognitively, memory. Your memory goes out the window when you're sleep deprived. You can't process things, and you're a very poor decision maker when you're sleep deprived. I mean, think about it. When you're tired, just like, shit, make it happen, whatever I need to do. And then emotionally, let's be fair. Who wants to get into an emotional discussion with a sleep deprived person, right?
I think, did you say you shouldn't have an argument after 11 o'clock or tough conversations after
Absolutely.
11?
You should never have an argument after 11. You should try not to have any arguments, period. But look, if you want to discuss things, I get it. But being thoughtful after 11, especially if that's not kind of one of your prime times, and we'll talk about these things called chronotypes and how some people are prime at night and some people are prime in the morning, it can be a disaster. So those three areas, and let's be fair, your audience probably already knows that, right? Yeah. They know what happens if they pull an all-nighter. You know what's going to happen? They might do okay on the test, but they're going to be crushed the next day.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, would you say it's better to do an all-nighter and cram information, or better to go to bed early, get a good night's rest, and maybe wake up a little bit earlier and then do some information? Because for me, there's no way I'd do an all-nighter.
Yeah, so it all depends. So number one, an all-nighter is never a good idea. Yeah. Like, there's plenty of data behind it. But there are a couple of different steps in between an all-nighter and getting a full night's sleep. So what most people don't know is sleep runs in between 80 and 120 minute segments, on average about 90-minute blocks, right? So here's what I tell people all the time. Look, if you really screwed up and you didn't study the right material, or you've got a ton of information that you've got to get to, do yourself a favor and get at least 3 hours or 4.5 hours. Get 2 of those 90-minute blocks or 3 of those 90-minute blocks. Because here's the thing. During REM sleep, that's when you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, so that you can regurgitate it on the test. So the problem is that a lot of kids they'll stay up all night, they'll be jamming caffeine all night. They'll get through half the test, and they can't remember the rest of the material because it hasn't logged into their memory yet. That's one of the things that sleep really does. But to be fair, I'd love it if people could get at least 6 hours of sleep a night. So that's 4 of these 90-minute chunks. Usually you should be spot on by then.
Yeah, and that's assuming you get good quality sleep.
And that's the great question to ask, right? Is how do we know, do we have good quality sleep or bad quality sleep? Now, a lot of people will turn to me and they'll say, well, if I dreamt last night, then I must be getting good quality sleep.
Really?
Turns out that that's not 100% true, right? You actually dream in any stage of sleep. And dreaming, actually, REM sleep, which is kind of where you do most of your dreaming, gets bigger and bigger as you go throughout the night. So when you're thinking about quality sleep, here's the best metric out there. When you wake up within 3 or 4 minutes of waking up, if you feel pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, you got good sleep.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as of right now, and kind of in today's vernacular, we see trackers, right? So I have a Ring tracker that tracks my activity, tracks my sleep. Some people have them on their wrist. Some people can have bands across their chest. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually track the quality of your sleep. But to be fair, like, I know what that data means because I'm a freaking sleep doctor, right? Most people really don't. And so what you're looking for is what's called stage 3, 4, or delta sleep, and REM sleep. And if both of those combined can make up about 50% of the night, you're in business.
And so is that deep sleep? Is that like, or is that something
Deep sleep is stage 3, 4, and REM sleep is very different. REM sleep is where we have that memory committal and dream. Deep sleep is where you get the physical restoration.
Right.
So what I tell people is early part of the night, you get that physical restoration. And if you think about it, whoever, created us, whoever that happens to be, they did it in a pretty smart way. And so what happens is the first third of the night is where you get the most deep sleep, which is, again, is that physical restoration. So, if a saber-toothed tiger wanders into your cave, or, a fire alarm goes off, your body can be up and ready to roll, physically speaking. But if you can get through the whole evening, that's where the mental part comes in.
Right. Okay, interesting. And I mean, you mentioned you wanted to clarify what sleep fatigue was. And I'd be curious, do you have people who don't even realize they've been fatigued for maybe years at a time?
All the time.
Right.
All the time.
Because it just becomes a norm.
Well, because they think, well, I guess this is how I'm supposed to be. I'm married, I've got 3 kids, or I've got a new job and it's keeping me up, and all these other, pieces of nonsense. When at the end of the day, if you go on vacation for 5 to 7 days and you get what you consider to be a decent amount of sleep during that period of time, and you wake up without an alarm clock feeling pretty good, you got good quality sleep. And that's the amount of sleep that you need. What's interesting is sometimes the timing can change. So we're talking about adults, we're talking about kids, we're talking about even younger. Each one of those demographic ages has a different timing that there is associated with their genes. So some people say, are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Turns out a lot of it has to do with how old you are.
Right. Because, yeah, I think you mentioned, like, obviously kids are morning people, right? That's why they're up at 5 or 6 a.m.
Exactly. So I created a system called chronotypes. And to learn what your chronotype is, you can go to chronoquiz.com, and we'll have it in the show notes and all that kind of stuff afterwards. But if you take the quiz, depending upon what your age is, I can kind of almost cheat and know what your chronotype is. So most kids, and when I say kids, we're talking about 15 to about 22, 23, are what we call a wolf or a nighttime chronotype. Now, you might never have heard this word chronotype, but if anybody's ever called you an early bird or a night owl, that's what I'm talking about, right? And think about it. When I was, 18 years old, what did I want to do? I wanted to stay up until 2 a.m. and sleep until noon the next day, right? That was awesome. Like, that was the best thing for me to do. It turns out that's genetic. And so there's a lot of parents out there who are like, oh, you're a lazy bum, get out of bed. Actually, you're genetically that way.
An excuse.
Exactly. Well, I've taught a lot of kids how to teach their parents, like, hey, mom, hey, dad, let me sleep in on the weekends. Only for certain periods of time and only for certain age groups. That turns out to not be such a bad idea.
Yeah, right. And so you're saying not all the time, but majority of people from 15 to 22 are wolves.
Exactly.
Which is your first chronotype.
Yes.
And that's the early bird?
No, that's the night owl.
The night owl, right. Sorry, of course.
Right?
Because they're up late. Yeah.
Because they're up late. So here's what's interesting is you physically go through all 4 chronotypes throughout your lifetime. So early birds, who I call lions, they're babies, right? They go to bed early, they wake up early. Now, eventually you might become a lion as well. As a middle schooler, then you're what I call a bear. You kind of go to bed around 7:30, you want to wake up around 7:30. Next is the wolf. That's kind of actually my chronotype. I actually got stuck in that chronotype. But what's interesting there is we're the ones who want to stay up late and sleep late. And then there's a 4th chronotype called a dolphin. Now, dolphins are very, very different. And that's actually my contribution to the literature, was I actually found out that there is a genetic predetermined sleep schedule for this kind of chronotype called a dolphin. And it's erratic. It's all over the place. And there's a lot of people out there with insomnia who have this dolphin chronotype. And so if you go to ChronoQuiz, you can figure it all out, but you could actually look on your DNA. So if you did 23andMe or Ancestry.com, they have a report that will tell you exactly where. It turns out there's 76 different places on the human genome, but the main place is in the PER3 gene. And if there's a flipping of what's called a SNP, which is a single nucleotide polymorphism, or DNA is made up of 4 blocks. And if they're supposed to be in a particular order, but if somehow they get switched, you're an early bird, or somehow they get switched, you're a night owl. Right when you get to about 2022, you lock into a chronotype for about 30 years until you're about 50, 55, which is actually what I just turned last week. And now your chronotype changes again. So you ever notice how your grandparents, when you go over for dinner, they're like, let's have dinner at 5 o'clock. And you're like, Grandma, what are you talking about? It's because her chronotype is starting to creep backwards and she's getting earlier. This all has to do with when your body produces melatonin. So if you go deep into the science of it, it all has to do with your melatonin curve.
Wow. Okay. A lot to take in there.
I know. I threw a lot at you.
I mean, the key thing to me, which is interesting, is, you're saying it's nature, not nurture in this example.
Absolutely. Now, nurture can be an influence. Right?
Of course.
Caffeine.
Yeah.
Right? It's a big one, right? If you're an early bird, caffeine will keep you up late if you want it to. But as a general guideline, you have a predetermined genetic sleep schedule. If you honor that, you're almost guaranteed to get the highest quality sleep available.
So, and obviously you've got a bit of a bias, but from your perspective, to figure out what your sleep type in, that's obviously something very important to do. And the earlier, the better.
Yeah, but I would argue I don't have a bias because it's biology.
Right.
Right? Like we could literally map your genome and I could tell you exactly what you are. And it has nothing to do with me or anything like that. It has to do with you.
Science.
I love it.
And I don't want to go into the chronotypes too much because you've put so much content out there.
I know.
If
crazy,
anyone's interested, go take the quiz, which will be in the show notes, and go watch your TED Talk where you summarize it in like 10 minutes.
Yes.
But you mentioned the bear, sorry.
Yes.
My accent coming through.
It's all good.
The bear, and by the way, you named them basically because the animals, that's their sleep schedule, right?
Yeah, so the animals actually follow the same sleep schedule. Kind of a funny story. When I was writing the book, you're in your publisher's office, and I had created these 4 avatars, but we had never quite figured out what we were going to call them. Somebody wanted to call them colors, somebody wanted to call them crystals. It turns out nobody wants to be a platypus.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, right? Nobody wants to be a porcupine. So I had to find inspirational animals that actually fit the chronotypes. Yeah. So lions are animals that wake up early and have their first kill before dawn.
Right.
So that makes sense. And who wouldn't want to be a lion? King or queen of the jungle, right? Bears, which is the one you just mentioned, They hibernate. They're kind of solar sleepers. So they like to get up around the sun comes up, like to go to sleep when the sun goes down. Wolves, which is me, are the night owls. Everybody knows wolves hunt in packs late at night. Dolphins was kind of an interesting one. People are like, what's the sleep schedule of a dolphin? It turns out that dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake looking for predators. Wow. And I thought that kind of feels like an insomniac because they're never quite asleep.
Wow, interesting. And so you've got these 4 chronotypes and people should go figure it out. But let's say they've figured out what they are.
Sure.
I think I'm a bear.
Okay.
I mean, I wake up quite early. I wake up around 6.
Okay. You might be leaning towards an early bear or a late lion, but I'm with you.
I don't know if that's because I simply...
Is this when you're in Australia or is this when you're here?
Oh, here I'm out of whack.
I bet. We can talk about jet lag in a minute.
Yeah, jet lag's big. Like
It's
Australian
huge.
jet lag is savage because
It's awful.
it's 20 hours and like all my friends...
Dude, I can help you on the way home. Don't worry.
Oh, amazing. And so, yeah, jet lag is interesting, but I wake up because, I like to have that routine. And so for me, there's so many benefits to waking up early. I definitely get tired at night. And when I'm in Australia, I almost never use my alarm. I have it there, but I wake up at like 10 minutes before it.
That is the key. So the thing you just mentioned, waking up within 5 to 10 minutes of your alarm naturally, that means you're in the right spot for your chronotype.
That's great.
So you're going to get the highest quality sleep. If I can digress for just a second, I want to tell you about an experiment that I ran that helped us figure this out. Because everybody wants to know, one of the big things that I get a lot of athletes, I get a lot of celebrities, a lot of people out there who say, how do I get 8 in 6? Right? I know I need 8, but I only have time for 6. How do I do that, Michael? This is exactly how you do it. If you follow your chronotype, your sleep schedule begins to compress. It's really interesting. So I did the experiment on myself because I'm like, if I'm going to talk about it with people, I better fucking do it myself, right? So I go to bed at midnight and said, I'm going to just let myself sleep. And at the beginning, I was waking up at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then I just kept, consistency was really the key factor here. And then all of a sudden I started waking up at 7:30. Then 7:15, then 6:45, then 6:15. My body will not let me sleep past about 6 o'clock.
Same with me.
I go to bed at midnight, click, I'm up.
Same with
me, I get super high quality sleep because I track it and I'm getting all the right percentages, but it's all condensed. And so one of the key things that I do with, again, athletes, celebrities, whoever, musicians, is if we can get you to the highest quality sleep for you, everything gets easy.
Right. And I mean, I'm the same. And my best mate, we're the same as well. It's like, I could come home from a night out drunk at 2 a.m. I'm still going to wake up between 6 and 7.
It's brutal, isn't it, bro?
Yeah, it is. Because I'm like, no, just let me sleep in.
I know. It's not going to happen.
And even like, I find it almost when I try to sleep in, I feel worse.
Oh, so you ever taken a nap and felt worse after the nap?
Like you've been punched.
Right. That's the same thing. It's like you're taking a nap in the morning because your body just woke up at let's say use you as an example at 6 and you're like, bro, I'm going to hit the snooze button or I'm just going to lie back here for about, another 30, 40 minutes. What happens is you get into a middle stage of sleep and then you try to wake your ass up and it's called sleep inertia. It's awful.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I feel like I've got a bit of a claim to fame to this. I've never, ever hit the snooze button in my life.
Dude, that's awesome.
Do you know why though? That sounds a bit wanky, but like I didn't know it existed until I was like 20. I saw it in movies and stuff, but like on the iPhone, I didn't realize it was there.
Right.
I didn't realize it was a thing people did. I figured, so for me, it was like I either turn off my alarm or I like won't get up.
So one of the ways you can tell if you're sleep deprived is how many times do you hit the snooze, right? If you hit the snooze more than once, there's no question in my mind, you're probably sleep deprived.
Right.
Another one is if you fall asleep within 3 minutes of turning the lights out, you're also probably sleep deprived. Like people tell me, oh, Michael, I fall asleep in 5 minutes flat. I'm like, bro, that's not a good sign, right? Because sleep's not an on-off switch. It's more like kind of pulling your foot off the gas and putting your foot on the brake. There's a process that should occur. It should take you a good 15 to 25 minutes to fall asleep.
Well, that's good to know because I feel like, I often will lie there. I find the best way I fall asleep is reading a book. Because as I read, I slowly start to drift off, and then it starts getting blurry, and I go, all right, bang, and I fall straight to sleep.
So there's a couple things to take warning of. So number one, reading is the best way to one of the best ways to fall asleep. Because again, I tell people all the time, I use the analogy, you need runway to land the plane, right? You don't want to just, wait till your head is falling, and then you get in bed and nothing happens, right? You want to be in bed and super chill and being able to start to relax. Now, for you, it's reading. And what that allows you to not focus on all the other stuff that's been going on all day. Because here's the problem, and people don't really realize this, but as soon as you get in bed and you turn off the light and there's nobody, calling you, emailing you, texting you, talking to you, all of the thoughts from the day start flooding in. And that's when anxiety starts to come up. Oh shit, did I do this? Oh crap, I've got this due the next day, that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're reading, you're focused on something else, your eyes start to get a little bit tired, you can turn it over, because you don't have to worry about your spot. Watching TV to fall asleep, although lots and lots of people do it, it can be addictive, and people go binge watching and show after show after show. So I usually have people set an alarm to have them stop watching TV.
Yeah.
And if you not a reader and TV is your thing, then here's what I would say to do. Watch your show, but then when you get in bed after you've done your hygiene, do a gratitude list. Just in your head, like, what are the things that you're grateful for? Some days it might be a lot, some days it might not be much, but believe it or not, there's data to show that optimism before sleep not only helps you fall asleep more faster, but gives you more positive dreams.
Wow.
Dude, what could be better?
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of the gratitude list. I think the other benefit of doing like even a little one, we have 3 questions. It's like, who am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? And it could be tiny. It could be, I'm grateful that person let me cut in or something.
Absolutely.
And
I'm grateful I got dinner.
Yeah. The reason I like it is not necessarily when you write the list, but because you have to write a list at the end of your day, it means you're looking for things to be grateful for throughout the day. So suddenly you're just way happier because you're like, oh, I can add that in my list. Oh, that's going on my list. And suddenly you're way more aware of all the good stuff that's happening in your life. And you're just more happy.
I would argue that if you're well slept, it's easier to find things to be grateful for.
100%.
Right? Because if you're sleep deprived, everything sucks.
Yeah. And so what is sleep deprivation? If you were to
if I was going to give you the summarized definition, it's when you wake up and you don't feel well rested, you're sleep deprived. Guaranteed.
Is there, because like sometimes, you wake up and you're not, it's always a bit of a grind to wake up sometimes.
Yeah.
Depending on,
again, if you're consistent,
yeah,
right, and your body is consistent, like you already said, like my body's going to wake up whether I want to or not. If you can keep, like if people get one piece of advice from this podcast, wake up at the same time every day. Within 21 days, your body will adjust to that time. It'll lock and load, and then you're good to go.
And is that, so let's say someone identifies their chronotype and they go, all right, great, Michael, I've got my chronotype. What do I do now? Do I have to, but I work a 9-to-5 job.
Yep.
I can't go to bed at 12 and wake up at what time? How do I do? Do you recommend they experiment with their body and they just start testing things?
I do. And number one, we've actually figured that out. So if you have a 9-to-5 job, you can have any chronotype and it'll work.
Right.
Also, the nice thing is nowadays you don't necessarily have to go to work.
Yes.
So there's a lot more working from home or different work environments. Also, to be fair, I've educated so many bosses, right? So if your employer is one that's like, you need to be here at 6 a.m., and you're, 22 years old, you might want to have him listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Right? And be like, hey, my biology is pushing me differently. If you want to get the best work product out of me, it'd be better off if I got to work at, let's say, 9:30.
Yeah. And I think if you're pitching it that way, and you're saying, look, I'm going to be more productive. I'm still going to work the same amount of hours.
Yes.
I'll just start later and work later or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I've got employees, and if they pitch that to me, I'd be like, yeah, great.
Yeah, and it makes intuitive sense. Once you start understanding that sleep equals either education or productivity, content in, content out, right? And so if you're well slept, you can not only absorb content better, but you can produce content better.
I love it.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, this has been great. Maybe we'll switch to some questions.
You bet.
I feel like I got so many questions. A lot of people sent them in. A lot of them we've probably already covered, so I'll kind of choose them on the fly.
Sure.
One that was quite common, and I'm sure you've probably heard all these questions before, is sleeping and having someone sleep with you worsens my sleep. Is that normal?
So it depends if you're male or female.
This was a male.
Okay, so most men sleep better with somebody in the bed with them, interestingly enough. However, it depends on who that person is, and it depends upon how well they sleep. So if you're sleeping next to a snoring bed partner, bro, that sucks, right? Guy or gal, right? That can definitely be an issue. Some people aren't used to having somebody in the bed with them. And so, for example, if you haven't had a long-term relationship where somebody's sleeping in the bed with you for, days, months, weeks, months, then it's definitely something to get used to. Also, temperature turns out to be the biggest factor.
Yeah.
Some people are warm sleepers, some people are cold sleepers. And, when somebody grabs the covers in the middle of the night and you're like, shit, this sucks, I'm freezing. The other big thing is the mattress, right? So some people like a firm bed, some people like a soft bed. So there's a lot of compromise that has a tendency to go on. But as a general guideline, men have a tendency to sleep better with somebody in the bed, and women have a tendency to sleep better without somebody in the bed. Now, you haven't asked me about animals, which is a whole nother factor.
And I wasn't going to, but I'm interested now.
Well, so I don't know if this is the same in Australia, but here in the States, lots of people have their animals sleep with them in the bed.
Yeah, when I was living with my parents, my dog would often sleep, depending on who we wanted to choose.
Right, exactly.
He might sleep next to you or at the foot of your bed or whatever.
Right, and so that whole pack mentality can sometimes be incredibly nice. So as an example, my wife, we have two dogs, and they both sleep in the bed with us. Me, my wife, the two dogs. I mean, it's like Lion Country Safari in there. It's ridiculous, right? So I've gotten used to that, but one of the dogs snores. And as he's gotten older, the snoring is getting louder. So it can be disruptive at times as well.
Yeah, right. No, my dog was lucky. He didn't make any noise.
Perfect.
And he'd move out the way for you. But it did take a little bit to get used to.
Yeah,
for sure,
it does.
having someone else in the bed. So that was definitely a popular question. Another one, which I'm sure you get a lot of, is like napping. What are your thoughts on a 2 p.m. nap, or like, is that something we should be doing?
I got a whole thing on napping. I'll just lay it out there. So first of all, many people don't know, but there are different types of naps out there, okay? And here's the key. You either want a short one or a long one. You don't want one in between. So you either want one
that's the one where you feel like you've been punched in the face. When
exactly.
You wake up. Yeah.
So you either want a 25-minute or less nap or a 90-minute or longer nap. 90 minutes, remember, is that length of the sleep cycle. Yeah. So if you can go through a full 90 minutes, you can really make up for some lost sleep, if you will. But the 25-minute nap is the one that I tell people about most. Now, you actually mentioned, do you nap at 2 p.m.? You picked the actual perfect time of day.
This is because when I start to go down.
So let me tell you why. It turns out it's in your biology. So as we're falling asleep, and this is in the evening time, our core body temperature rises. It hits a point right around 10:30 or 11, and then begins to drop. That drop in core body temperature is a signal to your brain to release melatonin.
Right.
Turns out there's a second drop somewhere between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, usually 2 o'clock. And so it's called a bimodal distribution of your body temperature. And so when your body temperature goes up a little bit at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to get sleepy. And so taking a 25-minute nap there is not necessarily the worst idea. Now, if it's 2 o'clock and your boss is looking at you like, hey, bud, I don't think you should be napping, here's an easy thing to do. Don't grab a coffee, right? Go outside and get a little sunlight.
Yeah.
Because melatonin is, we call it the vampire hormone. It only comes out in darkness. And so if it's not dark, if you've got direct sunlight, then you can thwart that and kind of push on. Now, there's another kind of nap that's my favorite kind of nap that people out there are going to really love. I call it the Napa Latte.
Napa Latte?
Yes. So this is how it works. So I'm going to back up for a second and explain to you the two systems of sleep and why this makes sense. So it turns out we have two systems of sleep. One is called your sleep drive. The other is called your sleep rhythm. When a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through your system, and it accumulates in a very specific area of your brain. The more adenosine, the sleepier and sleepier you get, right? Here's what's weird. If you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by 1 molecule.
Right.
Isn't that bizarre? Like the substance that's external to you that makes you awake, and the substance that's internal
make you sleep.
Like 1 freaking molecule. Here's where it gets interesting. If you take a cup of coffee or a caffeine tablet and then you close your eyes and you sleep, you burn through that adenosine. The caffeine is waiting in the wings. It fits perfectly into that receptor site. You're good for 4 hours, guaranteed.
Napa espresso. Wait, was it?
Napa Latte.
Napa Latte.
It works like a charm. But don't do one every day. To be clear, I don't want people Napa Latteing every day, but it's a great thing to use like right before an exam, or if you're going to do a performance, or if you've got something with sports or something like that, it works like a charm.
So could we just repeat that again? So you're saying have the coffee and then close your eyes.
Here's the thing. You want about 100 milligrams. So you want a small cup of coffee, like a 6-ounce cup of coffee. So here's the whole thing. Get a 6-ounce cup of coffee, put 3 ice cubes in it because you're going to slug it as quickly as you can. Close your eyes, make sure you're in a safe place, put on an eye mask, close your eyes for 25 minutes. Even if you don't sleep, it's still going to be valuable because you're kind of taking all the stress out. And when you pull off your eye mask and you wake up, you are good to go.
I'm going to try that because it's always interesting because I actually sometimes, when I first have a coffee, get a little bit tired. And everyone else is like, I don't feel the effects of coffee, I feel like. Which argues, why do I have it? I don't know. It's just become a bit of a habit.
Now, remember something. There's different levels of caffeine sensitivity. So my physician, she used to tell me, she'd say, Michael, I have an espresso every night before I go to bed. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, caffeine doesn't affect me. And I'm like, There's nobody that's true for. And she
Yeah.
said, it really is for me. We actually had her tested, and she's right. She doesn't produce the enzyme that actually digests and metabolizes caffeine, so
Wow.
it shoots right through her. So believe it or not, there are different levels of caffeine sensitivity. I mean, I got some people who can drink a cup of coffee and fall right to sleep. I got other people, if they eat a chocolate kiss, they're up all night long.
And this is what I kind of spoke about before with like the schooling system. This is where I think it's important to learn about your body. And
Yes.
this is why I think when you're young, it's a great time to experiment these things.
Absolutely.
Use it. You don't really have much responsibilities.
Right.
You can stay up till 1 o'clock and experiment for a week and then do it for 2
Absolutely.
weeks. But if you've
Yeah.
got kids to look after,
Whole
much
different
harder.
ballgame. Whole
And you've got a
different
job to go
ballgame.
to, but
Right.
it's like, this is a great time to experiment with your body and see what works for you. What chronotype are you?
Yeah.
I'm going to try I forgot what I keep
Chrono
wanting to say
quiz.
Napa espresso, but it's
Napa
Napa latte.
latte.
Yeah, Napa latte. Because I think it's a great thing. And I've noticed that 25 minutes is good for me. And I like the key point you said there. You don't have to fall asleep.
Right.
Just as long as your eyes are shut, your brain's relaxing. Because we did this, we did a 100-kilometer, which is 60-mile walk.
Okay.
In one day.
Holy
The
crap.
goal is to do it in 24 hours.
Wow.
And so obviously the night before, and because we hopped up at like 3 a.m. So we're like, how do we get as much sleep as possible?
Dude, you should have called me beforehand.
I
I could
know.
have given you a whole strategy for this.
But I went to bed at like 6 p.m., which is very tricky to do.
Not easy at all.
But we spent a whole thing calming ourselves down. All the lights were red in the house, and we were like playing music,
Yeah, yeah.
and we like calmed down. And I managed to fall asleep by like 7:30, which was pretty crazy. But I woke up at like 10, and you have this guilt of like, God, I want to be asleep. I want to be asleep.
Right.
But
That causes anxiety.
Exactly.
And then you can't sleep. Same thing
Exactly.
happens when you wake up in the middle of the night and you look at the clock and it's 3 a.m. and you got to be up at 6. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Sleep.
Yeah.
Nobody in the history of time has ever thought themselves to sleep. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And my mum was just like, Byron, remember, so long as you're just there with your eyes closed in a quiet environment, your brain is resting.
So there's actually science on it. There's now something that we call non-sleep deep rest. So this is where you're lying in what we call a quiescent state. So it's dark, not a lot of noise, right? And you're just relaxing. It's not as good as sleep, but an hour of that, it's worth about 20 minutes of sleep.
Right.
So what I tell people all the time is, look, if you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like, shit, it's not going to happen for me, lie there and relax, and you're still going to get some level of rejuvenation.
Even if you're not going to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Just by lying there.
Exactly.
Well, there you go. There's a bit about napping. So I love that. The Napa latte. We kind of covered this. So there's a question here that is, what is the optimal time to sleep? But it sounds like there is no optimal time.
It's all based on your chronotype,
Yeah.
right? And so once you go to Chrono Quiz and figure it out, you can actually play around with it. And it's got a little bit of give to it, maybe a half an hour to an hour on either side. But once you find it and you lock it in, bro, everything gets easy. There's actually an optimal time for sex, optimal time for drinking coffee, optimal time for food intake,
Yeah.
because it's all based on your hormones. And actually, my third book called The Power of When, it's not a sleep book. It's like a life book. So once you figure out your chronotype, you can actually log in to anything that you want. Perfect time to talk to your kids, perfect time to tell a story, perfect time to tell a joke. Like, it's insane.
Yeah. Because I remember in your TED talk, you had like a spreadsheet sort of, and it's like, if you're a wolf, you have coffee at 7 o'clock or whatever times and everything.
Exactly.
So yeah, definitely go check that out, guys, because I think that's super, super valuable. This one, I have very sensitive eyes. I have quite light eyes, and so like in the sun, it hurts a lot. I always carry sunglasses, and I find like, especially because I work at my computer most of the day.
Right.
I get quite computer fried, but then in bed, I really use that blue light thing. But I don't know how strong the science is behind the
Let's
lights
talk
and
about
stuff. So yeah,
I know a lot about blue light.
Is that true?
So here's what's interesting is your blue light sensitivity is based on those melanopsin cells I was talking about earlier. But here's what people don't really understand is it depends upon how much blue light you got earlier in the day has an effect on if blue light is going to be affecting you at night. I personally wear blue light blocking glasses. They work great. Now, I'm going to be fair. Some people now use the clear blue light blocking glasses. They don't do shit.
That's what I've heard. Because the ones I have are like these ugly, bright orange ones.
Those are the ones that work.
They don't look nice. And I'm
they
like,
don't look great. Like you look like, the guy from X-Men.
yeah, that's exactly what I have. They're like cycling glasses.
Right.
Like $20 on Amazon.
Right. And they work. Like they actually work. What I do, for example, is I might bring those with me if I'm flying to Europe. Like let's say I was flying to do the podcast in Australia.
Yeah.
I would actually bring with me my own sleep kit that would have blue light blocking glasses. I would also bring a light box, because if you institute light, or if you give yourself blue light, you can actually shift your circadian rhythm.
Right.
That's how I'm going to help you on your way home.
I was about to say, so you're like fixing your jet lag before you land.
Absolutely.
That's cheeky. That's
It's
very cheeky.
awesome, bro.
And so, yeah, because I've also seen, obviously, I'm not very good at like science stuff, but based on the research I saw, I was like,
Seemed pretty good to
the
me.
clear ones, no one could back it up. They were like,
You need three things. You need the color, you need the angle, and you need the coating.
Yeah.
Right. And so what ends up happening, the color has to do with brightness. So the coating is what they can put on any glass, which reduces the specific frequency, which is 460 to 490 nanometers of light. That's blue light, and it hits that eye and it kind of does all that funky stuff. You can coat any lens to do that, but the light will still be bright. And that's where the amber part comes in. The angle has to do with, you want something, so you mentioned you used cycling glasses. Those are perfect because they wrap all the way around.
Yeah.
What you don't want is exterior light coming in or coming up from beneath, because that's where it messes you up.
right, yeah. So the cycling ones, again, they don't look very nice.
Yeah. They're
And
$20.
And I'd only wear them from like 7 o'clock onwards if I was
Right.
working or something. But I found that really beneficial to me, because I literally, if blue light is in a computer or phone, I have like a small headache.
Oh, well, here's one other thing that you may not know about is there's a free software called Flux.
That's what I use.
Yep.
And I max it out.
It's fantastic.
I have it at the max.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
Flux.
that's where
it's
you
like,
want to do
It's
it.
like bright orange. People
Yeah,
always
yeah.
freak out. They're like, what's going on with your computer? I'm like, nah, that's just me.
But here's one thing, the things that are on the phone don't work.
The Apple, like,
It's
it's
bullshit.
really weak.
It's bullshit.
I
Like
think-
there's actually a study that looked at it, and it does nothing for changing melatonin production. So you'd have to wear the glasses. But if you can
Right.
get Flux on your computer, you're good to go.
Yeah. I mean, my recommendation is always just try to avoid being on your phone late at night anyway.
For sure. Here's the biggest problem with being late on at your phone is it's not necessarily the blue light that's giving you a hard time. It's the engagement.
Yeah. It's keeping your brain awake because you're
Right.
like, you're texting, you're
Dude,
watching
if you're
TikTok,
looking
whatever.
about if you're trying to get your high score on Candy Crush,
Yeah.
you ain't trying to go to bed.
Yeah. It's keeping your brain awake.
Right.
And that's where TikTok is really dangerous. Because TikTok is so like,
It's unbelievable.
your brain does not stop.
I have to set an alarm sometimes. Like I give myself like 20 minutes on TikTok, because if I don't, I could be there for an hour and a half.
Oh my God.
Easy.
You lose 30 minutes.
And I
like
have
it's
my own
nothing.
TikTok videos teaching people about sleep.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
ridiculous.
Yeah, so I talk about this stuff as well. And I'm like, this is hypocritical.
Right.
How many hours should we sleep? You kind of already mentioned that.
So as a general guideline, somewhere between 7 and 9 seems to work. But if you can figure out your chronotype and layer it in, I'm a 6 to 6.5 hour guy. I'm 55 years old. This is the level of energy I have every day.
And so you notice a huge difference when people can
massive.
nail this. Yeah.
It's massive. If you can find your zone, it's kind of like your swim lane.
Yeah.
If you can find your swim lane and keep doing the breaststroke, you're going to be in good shape.
Amazing. The impacts of pressing snooze, you already mentioned the, what's it called? The inertia.
Yes, that's sleep inertia.
So by hitting snooze
it
multiple
just
times.
beats you up.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because I saw something that's like one of the worst ways to wake up. Just going snooze, 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 snooze,
It's
snooze.
awful, because basically what you're doing is, here's the problem, is the average snooze is between 7 and 9 minutes. You can't get into a deeper stage of sleep. And so all you do is give yourself light, crappy sleep. It's the worst.
And you're just ricocheting between
Exactly.
bang, bang, bang. Yeah. Never argue at 11 or run at dawn.
So I tell people this all the time, because here's the problem is you get emotionally involved, you get emotionally volatile. Even like, you don't even want to, like, as an example, I have one of my patients is a very famous electronic dance music guy. His name is Steve Aoki, right? So he's like the stadium shows. He doesn't go on until 11, 3. And, one of the things we have to do is we have to figure out how to keep him calm after the show. Otherwise, he's up for 3 or 4 hours after the show because he's been out there bopping it around, right? And so thinking through that, here's the one metric that people need to know is it's all about heart rate. If you can get your heart rate below 60, you can enter into a state of unconsciousness. So a lot of people are like, okay, that sounds easy, Michael. How do I do it? One of the easiest techniques you can use is something called 4-7-8 breathing. So you breathe.
Oh, I heard this recently.
It's super
I saw-
cool.
where did I hear it? TikTok.
Probably from me.
Maybe it was you, yeah.
It's my biggest TikTok. So you breathe in slowly for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you push out for a count of 8. So the science behind it is kind of interesting. And so when you breathe, so first of all, most people are shallow breathers. They don't fully breathe in and fully breathe out. So you end up with carbon dioxide weighs more than oxygen, so it sits in the bottom of your lung. And so if you breathe in deeply, you can really fill that lung. When you hold, you burn through the oxygen, and when you push out at a count of 8, you literally dump all that excess carbon dioxide.
Right.
So your heart doesn't have to work as much, which slows down your heart rate. And it's once you get below a heart rate of 60, that's easier to get into a state of unconsciousness.
And so you're saying anyone who struggles to go to sleep, how many times do you recommend it?
I do 7 to 8 cycles, but I actually have people using it in the middle of the night as well.
Right.
So let's say you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you look at the clock. Oh shit, what am I supposed to do? Number one, if you don't have to pee, don't pee. Now I want to be clear. If you got to go to the bathroom. But here's what happens. You go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position. You walk across your room. Guess what? You just jacked your heart rate up.
Yep. Turn the light on. Bang.
Right. You're done.
Yeah.
Definite. So strategically place night lights along the way for you, like one in the can and one on the way.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you get back to bed, again, if you had to pee, it's 4-7-8 breathing and just chillax. And remember that non-sleep deep rest. Right. So don't get anxious about it. Say, you know what? I heard that sleep doctor guy, and he said, I'm going to do that 4-7-8 breathing for 5 to 7 cycles, and I'm just going to chill here. And what that does is it lowers that anxiety, lowers that heart rate, allows the natural sleep process to take right over.
I think it's really good because it gives you something to focus on as well.
Exactly.
Because like people, I remember we were at this event and these two girls were talking to us and they're just like, yeah, man, whenever I go to bed, I literally lay in bed for an hour and just overthink everything I did that day.
Yes.
And she's just...
Bad idea.
And she was like, I think about everything I said wrong. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds awful. And she's like, it is. And I'm like, why do you do that? And she's like, I just can't help it. And so
this helps you not think about those things.
Because it gives you something, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and out.
Right. So it's in.
Oh, sorry, in. Sorry,
so
in.
It's in.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have to have more out because you want to dump all that excess carbon dioxide.
Yeah. And so that, again, it's almost meditative in a way. You can
is.
use that to focus on. So there's a little hack. Lots of hacks.
Those are.
The coffee hack, this hack. And I love how practical it is. Something I really like about you. You take these ideas, which are, for most people, incredibly complex, simplify them and say, all right, here's what to do.
And I make them actionable.
Exactly, actionable, which is what I love doing. You know, that was one of my other issues with school is like you learn all these things and you never implement them.
It's hard. Well, and it's hard. It's like, who cares about the history of blah, blah, blah? Like, how is that going to help me? This shit helps.
Yeah, immediately.
Right.
You mentioned the best time. Oh, no, you didn't. What was the best time to drink coffee, or does it depend on your chronotype?
So a little bit on your chronotype, but I can give you some general guidelines. So here's what's interesting.
Or do you think we shouldn't drink coffee if you can avoid it?
Okay. So if there was a universe where I could actually get people to not drink coffee, that would be amazing. But let's be fair, bro.
Never gonna happen.
It's never going to happen. It's the #1 abused drug in the world, more so than anything else, right? But here's a couple things to know. In order for your brain to get out of a state of unconsciousness, you need 2 hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and they pop and they bring you out. If you compare the strength of adrenaline and cortisol to caffeine, it's like comparing cocaine to weak tea.
Yeah.
Okay. So people tell me all the time, they're like, I can't wake up unless I have my cup of coffee. Bullshit. Here's what I'm telling you. #1, you're probably waking up at the wrong time or you're probably sleep deprived. What you need to do is hydrate, not caffeinate when you wake up. Most people don't know this, but sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. You lose almost a full liter of water just from the humidity in your breath.
A liter?
A liter. Right? So think about it. You're drinking the night before, which definitely kills your hydration. Then sleep takes another liter out. You wake up and you drink coffee, which is a diuretic and makes you might as well be a raisin by the time it's all said and done.
Coming out of you.
So wait 90 minutes, hydrate. I say anywhere from 16 to 18 ounces of water. So one of the things I have to tell people, as soon as you wake up, I tell them to do the 3 15s. 15 deep breaths, 15 ounces of water, 15 minutes of sunlight. Sunlight turns off that melatonin faucet in your head. You've now hydrated. You've woken up and become present. That's what the breathing does. And you have a great, great morning. If you wait 90 minutes for your first caffeine, here's what happens. The adrenaline and cortisol finally start to drop at around 90 minutes. And so when you drink caffeine, it actually boosts them up. It will change your existence. Everybody I get to just wait 90 minutes after they open their eyes to have their first cup of coffee, they usually only need one, which is kind of nice, and it works like a charm.
Yeah, and it's something I've been doing. And I find it easy because I go to the gym in the morning, and so it's like once I've done my routine and I'm back, I'm starting my day, it's been about 2 hours anyway.
Perfect.
And so I don't need coffee to go to the gym.
No.
And so, I think it's super important. And so you're not saying, it doesn't really matter what time you wake up, so long as you wait 90 minutes before the coffee.
Exactly.
Or replace the coffee with water.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is when do you stop? So people always want to know, like, when's the last time I can have my caffeine? So number one, I hope that you only needed one in the morning. But again, I'm not so foolish as to think that that's how people are going to really do it.
Yeah.
You really want to think about stopping around 2 p.m. And here's why. Caffeine has a half-life, depending upon how quick of a metabolizer you are, of somewhere between 6 and 8 hours. So if you stop at 2, 8 hours later is 10, which is kind of when most people are starting to think about going to bed. But half of the caffeine is still wandering around your brain. So for my insomniacs, I'm like, bro, back it up. Like, see if you can only have 1 cup, somewhere around 9, 10 o'clock, and then be decaf for the rest of the day.
I mean, my perspective is if it's that hard to quit, that's an addiction.
You got a problem.
And it's like, there's something wrong there. It's like, I drink coffee, but if someone said you can't have coffee for a week, that doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee every day. It's one of those things where, like, I got it today because I was cold outside.
Yeah,
and as you can see, I think I've had like 4 sips.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you've had like that. Also, American coffee, enormous.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Like
I don't understand why we get these monster coffees.
This is a small or a regular. This is a short in America.
Yeah.
Like, this is all I want.
That's crazy. Like, he got me a large, which I never would have ordered myself. But like, to be clear, we'll get the camera on it.
Yeah.
I've literally only brought it down by an inch.
Yeah. It's down like a tiny bit. Look, this has been so good. Oh, such a fascinating episode. I got a few more questions, and I'll go into my final question, which is not to do with sleep, but you can make it whatever you like of it. Have you heard of this 8-minute military nap?
I have.
Where they put their legs up?
I have.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's bullshit.
Really?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, if you're in the military, number one, you're in a very different situation than 90% of the people out there. What I can tell you is that what that technique does is it lowers your heart rate very, very quickly. And you're already probably so damn tired that boom, you can fall asleep. Now, what the data about 8 minutes is kind of interesting. That comes from NASA. And what we learned is a 7 to 8 minute nap will give you enough level of alertness to change your perception. So that's why they use it in the military settings. But as a general guideline, it's really not going to probably be as effective as you want it to be.
Yeah, because you see a video of it, and of course, as humans, we see, only 8 minutes, bang, I can save time, and you go, I want to do that. Right. But you're saying in the normal day environment, it's not that practical.
It's really not that. 25 minutes or less. And if you really want to get a big bang, try the Napa Latte.
Yeah, totally.
Don't do it every day, but try the Napa Latte. You'll find it works pretty well.
Interesting. And we got here kind of the final question before getting to the last one. 8 hours of sleep in the modern day. So let's say, I don't know, 11 o'clock until whenever, 6 or 7.
Yep.
Versus like primal sleep, as in following the sun. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously, we used to just go to sleep when the sun went down.
Yep. So when we were back in the day, when we were an agrarian society, like a farming society, right? Here's what you would do is you would go to sleep right after the sun went down because you had to get up when the sun came up. Believe it or not, in the middle of the night, people would wake up in the middle of the night, have another meal. Sometimes.
Really?
Oh yeah. We used to call it the second sleep. Right. Then the Industrial Revolution, this asshole Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and screwed it all up for all of us. So now everybody's compacted sleep. When you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, what's happened is our bodies have now adapted to this. So the idea of the primal sleep is probably no longer a good idea. However, there was one study that kind of throws that into the woods, which was interesting. And I use into the woods because they took a bunch of insomniacs camping and they said no clocks. Go to bed at, when the sun goes down, wake up when the sun comes up. None of them had insomnia by the time they left.
Right. That does throw a bit of a spanner, doesn't it?
Right. So it's interesting to kind of see. I would argue that you need to learn about your body, right? Like I really liked when you said, look at you. Like, there's a lot of people out there who are saying and doing a lot of different stuff, right? Who cares? You need to worry about you and what your body is telling you. And when your body tells you it's tired, it's because you're either not getting the quantity or the quality of sleep if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And if you spent all of your 20s figuring out your sleep, your nutrition, what works for you.
Are you kidding me? You're going to crush it.
Exactly. But then we have the perception, 30, oh my God, life's starting to get,
right.
That's how it feels when you're like 21 or 18 or anything. But
Absolutely.
It's like, my God, if you can get that sorted, surround yourself with some friends, figure out your sleep cycle, what food works for you, your diets, all that sort of thing. Like, oh my gosh, the value of that is
what I tell people
infinite.
all the time, especially young people who are like, oh my God, 30, that's so old. If you want it to feel old, don't eat well,
Yeah.
don't sleep well, and stay in a dark room by yourself and not have any friends. And I can assure you, your 30s are going to suck.
Exactly. And that's kind of like where my program comes in. And that's why I try
Exactly.
to give them good quality people and teach them kind of that stuff. But look, this has been an incredible episode. And thank you so much for coming all the way out here.
Sure, no
This
problem.
has been amazing. My final question, which I ask every guest.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with sleep unless you want to make it.
We'll see.
It's just, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old today? Or like, I mean, your daughter's 19. What advice would you give to someone of that age group?
So it'll probably be a piece of sleep advice.
Love it.
Because that's kind of where I'm at with it. But wake up at the same time 7 days a week.
Okay.
Like, people ask me, like, Michael, if there's just one thing that you could do, honestly, 7 days a week, Saturday, Sunday, wake up at the same time. It will serve you so well.
Amazing.
And the other big thing is hydrate. A lot of people really don't think, especially when you're young, you don't think about hydration, but hydration turns out to be such an important factor for almost your entire body.
Yep. And again, if you can't commit to 7 days, it's like, come on, it's not that difficult.
It's really not hard.
Yeah.
And once you do it for about a 21-day stretch, your body gets used to it and it'll start to happen like it does with you naturally.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's a good one. Give it a month.
Yeah.
Give it a
30
month.
days.
Yeah. And figure out, go do the test, which we'll put in the links and everything. But Dr. Michael, thank you so much for coming on.
My
such
pleasure.
such a privilege to have you on. I know you're a busy man. You got lots happening. I'm sure we'll see lots of these clips on TikTok and whatever.
Absolutely.
But yeah, very grateful to have you on. And if people want to find out more, read your books,
Yep.
where's
So
the best place to go?
super easy to find on the internet. My website is thesleepdoctor.com. Same in the YouTube, same with TikTok, same with Facebook,
Google.
same with Twitter.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing. That's where you're going to find. And we put different types of content on different ones. So, if you get a chance, subscribe to a bunch of them because you'll get to learn a whole lot of different things about sleep.
And I think you've got 4 books now, is it?
I've got 4 books now, working on a 5th.
4 books. So there's lots of content out there.
There is.
But make sure to go do the quiz. I think the quiz is that low-hanging fruit.
It is.
And then I think the TED Talk as well, because that covers it in like 15 minutes.
Easy.
But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Sweet dreams.
Yep. I love it.